Okay, hello everyone. Yeah, this is the first study under the social approach. So we are going to look at the study of Milgram, obedience, okay? Study, all right? So Milgram study on obedience, right? Now, what is the aim and background of the study? All right, the aim is to find out whether people would be obedient to authority, even if it meant physically hurting others. So what do you think? Will you obey someone even at the expense of hurting other people? Okay. Now, background for that: 11 million people were gruesomely killed by Nazis. Okay. Milgram, being Jewish, sought to find if anyone under a similar situation would harm or murder people under an authoritative figure. So if you have an authoritative figure over you, will you harm people? Will you kill people if you're given the instruction to go kill them? All right. Now, situational explanation. Milgram suggests a situational explanation for obedience. Obedience might be that, okay, people are in a particular environment or there are cues in the environment. There are certain things in the environment that enforce obedience, right? Now, initial prediction. Milgram had conferred with his psychology student, okay, and colleagues. All right, and they predicted that less than 3% of the participant in this experiment now, less than 3% of the participant would deliver a maximum voltage shock of 450 volt. All right, so that's what they did in the study. They tried to apply electric shock to people. All right, so if I ask you, I want you to apply this shock on someone, and then you have to move all the way down the voltage meter from 15 to 450 volts. So will you be able to get to the end when you know that, okay, there's a possibility for the volt meter, the shock to actually kill the person? So people, let me say the student of Milgram and then his colleagues actually predicted that only 3% will be able to reach the end. All right, so majority will stop. They will not obey at some point, right? Okay, now research method and design. It was a laboratory experiment. Okay, there was control observation. It was controlled observation. Okay, yeah, it was basically controlled observation, not laboratory experiment. So controlled observation in the sense that the observation was done in a laboratory. All right. So it was conducted at Linsley Den Hall at Yale's University. All right. So university is good enough. This one you might not have to memorize it. Featuring a professional laboratory setup for psychological experiment. Now, what about the IV, the independent measures? Design, sorry, the research method now. No, not method, the research design rather. They used independent measures design. Okay, the study utilized an independent measures design where each participant were tested individually under controlled condition. All right, so the IV really is not that important because it's not really an experiment as such. It's rather a controlled observation. Okay, so the IV in this situation is just more like the okay the obedience, right? Or let me say the authority, and instruction given to them. Okay, so it wasn't as if there are different levels of the IV. No. So moving forward. Now, key personnel, they use the stooge, right? Or let me say they use stooges. Now, the experimenter is different from Milgram. Take note of that. So they used Mr. William as the experimenter who wore a lab cloth, right? A lab coat. Okay. He's a stooge. It was a 31-year-old male school biology teacher. So maybe you can liken this person to your biology teacher for easy remembrance. Okay, that is still classical conditioning. All right, in a quote called Mr. William. All right, so that's the name of the person. He wore a great technician coat. All right, and had a stern manner. All right, so another person is Mr. Wallace, who happens to be the learner. Is another stooge. He was a Confederate. That is, he worked in hand. Is also Confederate, can also be stooge. That's another word. Okay, an accountant. This is actually an accountant who pretended to be another participant. I'll explain that in detail. He was 47 years old, and he had to play the role of the learner. Okay, so it was like a teacher and then a learner kind of procedure. Now, sampling method. It was volunteer sampling or self-selecting sampling. So there was an advertisement, a newspaper advert that was broadcasted or published rather, all right, to recruit 40 men aged between 20 to 50. So if you want to use a volunteer sampling technique in your design the study experiment, you can create an information around the advert you create, right? Or let me say you can just write down the information around the advert you create. So between the year 20 and 50 old, okay, 20 and 50, all right. Participant background, they were from a variety of educational backgrounds. They were from New Haven. New Haven, all right. So all of them were from New Haven. So you can know that that will reduce the generalizability, right? Okay, procedure. Now, initial setup, payment. There was a remuneration. Each participant was paid $4.50 for their willingness. Excuse me, please. Let me take some water. For their willingness to participate. Okay, now role assignment. That is how were they allocated to the different groups, because they can either be a stooge. No, they can either be a teacher or a learner, right? Don't forget that it can be two at once, right? Teacher and learner role. So there was a particular balloting that was done. They had to roll the paper, or let me say they wrote the rows in the paper, and then okay, let me take it again. They wrote the rows in a paper and put it in a hat for the participant to pick. So what they did is, normally if you have two rows, you should write one which happens to be the teacher in a paper and then learner in another paper. Then you fold it, you ask the participant to pick, right? So what they did in essence is that they wrote teacher and teacher. So they folded it and they asked the participant to pick first. Okay, so if the participant picks, he picks teacher always. So which means that the second person, because there were two, so it can either be from the 40 participants recruited against Mr. Wallace. Mr. Wallace who replicated for all the participants. Okay, so now if the participants are the one speaking first, they have to pick first. All right, so they are always picking the teacher role, so which makes Dr. Wallace to always play the role of the learner. So that is a form of deception. So they claim that they were assigned the role, and however the role was not fairly assigned. It was they played them. So deception. Okay, now they also deceived them again that the experiment is focused on memory and learning. So they said, okay, we are carrying out the study on memory and learning. So you as a teacher now, you will teach the learner something. I want to see if he's able to memorize all the things. So you're going to ask him questions afterwards. If he gets it right, good. If he gets it wrong, you apply the electric shock. So the participant was given a mild electric shock of 45 volts to the wrist to convince that the shock was genuine. So in the way they arranged the room, all right, the teacher was seated in one part, okay, and then the learner was seated adjacent, that is beyond the wall. Okay, let me put it that way. There was a particular wall separating the teacher and the learner. Okay, so you might want to ask, how will the learner respond? Maybe shouting, right? No, the learner has 4 options to select from, 4 buttons. If you select one, that means he's choosing option 1, 2, like that. He's choosing option 2. All right, so and then the teacher can see the option the learner has selected. So the teacher is going to pair some words together and is going to read it out to the learner, and then the teacher will ask, okay, which word was paired together initially, and then we'll read some options, 4 options. So if the learner gets it right, then that is good. It moves on to the next question. But if the learner gets it wrong, then it will apply the electric shock. All right, so it's as simple as that. Now, before they started the experiment, the experimenter now, who happens to be the biology teacher, all right, who is 31 years old, went with the participant to go and set the learner in his position. So they make the learner sitting on a chair, and then they try to fasten his hands to the chair such that he can't move, and then they attach the electrical cables on him. Now, before they start the experiment also, they use a particular battery which is 45 volt. They apply the shock on the participants now, not the learners. They apply the shock on the participant so that the participant will know that, okay, what he's doing is actually applying electric shock on the learner. So it's an example of the thing. So the participant will have a feeling of what he's about to do to the learner, right? Okay, so however, the participant is going to, okay, I'm going to get there now. The electric shock itself, right? All right, so the memory task, okay, they had to read word pairs. I think I've explained all this to the learner, to their record, okay, read the words aloud to the learner and then test their ability to recognize the already paired words out of the 4 options that will be listed afterwards. Okay, so now for the electric shock, now it had 30 different um, um, shocks. Okay, let me put it that way. 30 different shocks starting from 15, 30, 45, 60, okay, 75, 90, 105, 120, like that, all the way to 450. If you count it, then it's going to make a total of 30 shocks. All right, so the shock generator had 30 lever switch, okay, and then the shock also had um, a verbal label. Okay, so observation: Milgram watched through a one-way mirror. Okay, Milgram himself was outside watching through a one-way mirror, and then the experimenter was there seated in the room as the one controlling the thing. Okay. All right, so the voltage level, there was slight shock. The shock switch from 15 to 60 was regarded as slight. Okay, moderate is 75 to 120. So the experiment, the teacher has to start with 15 and move all the way down. Okay, strong shock, this, and then you can check this. Now, danger, XXX in a way, I believe in this situation signifies death. So you can imagine if participants get to this stage, what will you expect? They should stop, right? Because this might signify maybe killing the person. So would they be able to go through and then select the 2 shocks, 2 switches here, which is 435 and 450 volts? Let's see. All right, so experimental prods. Now it could get to a point that the teacher feels, I want to stop. Don't forget that the participants are the one playing the role of teachers, right? Okay, in whom they want to see the level of obedience. Now if the teacher, the participant, okay, who also happens to be the teacher now, wants to stop, the experimenter will use these 4 prods, okay, in this particular order. Oh, I don't think I want to do this again. The experimenter will say, please continue, or please go on. Okay, if there's a further discussion, the experimenter will use the experiment requires you to continue. All right, if you want to stop again, they will go to Pro 3. Oh, it is absolutely essential that you continue. Okay, and then they will move to the last one. You have no other choice, you must go on. All right, so this actually makes it look like it's a forced thing, like you have to do it, right? But in actual fact, you really have to do it. What do you stand to lose if you insist that you're not interested again, you want to leave? I mean, then after that 4 prods, the experimenter will allow the participant leave. Okay, so but if in the process of doing that, after second person wants to continue again, then you go on. So the person discusses again, you start from prod 1 all the way down to 4. So additional prods, concern for learner's safety. Prods used when the subject asks if the learner was liable to suffer permanent physical injury. So if they ask, how will the person suffer physical injury? All right, so the experimenter will say, although the shocks may be painful, there is no permanent tissue damage. So please go on. All right, and then followed by 2, 3, 4 if necessary. Now, learner's unwillingness. Prods used if the subject said that the learner did not want to go on. All right, whether the learner likes it or not, you must go on until he has learned all the word pairs. So whether you like it or not, you have to go on. So please go on, and then they move all the way to the prods again, the 4 prods again. Okay, so learners' responses. Initial silence. So they were told that if the learner is silent, you treat it. Okay, no, the learner's response, who happens to be Mr. Wallace, right? That is on the other side, and then the electrodes, the electric shock is attached to his hands. Okay, now it will get to a point which is 300 volts. When you get to 300 volts, Mr. Wallace is supposed to remain quiet. Okay, as the learner, you shouldn't say anything. Okay, all right. So and then that is after the 300 volts rather. Okay, So after the 300 votes, he should remain silent. Okay. And then the teacher was told that if the learner is not saying anything, he should treat that as um, wrong answer. Then he should apply the shock. Okay, at some point you might already begin to think that, okay, well, if the learner also pay attention, right, which is Dr. Wallace, Mr. Wallace, and then he gets everything right, after all, the shock will not be applied, right? Okay, but that was not the case. The way it was done is that, okay, Dr. Wallace, who is actually a stooge, all right, was supposed to intentionally get a lot of questions wrong. It's intentionally, okay, so that the experimenter can begin to, rather the participant, the teacher can begin to apply the shock. Okay, so when it gets to 300 shock, when the 300 shock is administered, the learner pound on the room's wall, which is heard by the subject. So when it gets to 300, you pound, and after that you remain quiet. Okay, after that you stop responding to anything. That is for Dr. Wallace. You do not say anything again, and the teacher will obviously begin to treat that as wrong answers and is supposed to be applying the shock. Okay, now after getting the 315 shock, the pounding is repeated. Okay, and after, no response appear for the questions and is not heard from. Okay, so after this again, all right, you pound again, which is I think 330 now. You pound the wall again, and after that you remain quiet all through to the end. Okay, so teacher's instruction, that was the instruction given to Dr. Wallace. Okay, and how he's supposed to behave. And also is, okay, now moving to the teacher's instruction. Voltage increase. The teacher instructed to move 15 higher with each mistake. So if you make a mistake here now, you press 15, and then when you read another word and it makes another mistake, you don't repeat the 15, you go to 30 now, you keep moving higher. Now, voltage announcement. The teacher was told to announce the voltage level before administering it. I believe this is just to ensure that, okay, the teacher actually knows, is fully aware of what he is doing. Like the switch is about to press, that this thing is 300. So, okay, after reading the word, you get it wrong. Okay, this is 450 volts, you press. All right, now initial test. The teacher is given a preliminary series of 10 words to read out to the learner. Okay, so before the main experiment, they did this short sample, or let me say this short pilot study, all right, where the teacher was given 10 words to read out to the learner, and then the learner is supposed to get 7 wrong and 3 correct. So the teacher is supposed to move, you know, when you calculate from 15, okay, and then you move down the line 7 switches, it will get to 105 volt. All right, so this study was done by each of the participants to ensure that they all know how to do everything, that all the procedure of the experiment, nothing is complicated for them, so that when they have to do it on themselves by their own, all right, they do not have any issue. All right, what about repetition? A second list is given and is told to repeat the procedure. All right, and list until the words are memorized by the learner. So for the main study now, they gave another list, right, to ensure that, okay, this word now they have to learn everything. So they keep doing it. If they get to the end of the list, they go back again, okay, to ensure that the learner has been able to learn everything. All right, so teacher's reaction. Verbal protest for the teacher. Now, participants express strong moral concerns about continuing, okay, with statements like, I'm going to chicken out. Okay, I can't do that to a man. I will hurt his heart. All right, these are some of the exclamation being made during the study. What about physical signs of distress in the process? Participants exhibited clear physical manifestations of stress, including sweating, okay, trembling, nervous laughter, and inappropriate smiling. Okay, these are some of the behaviors that were displayed by the teachers, the participant. Now, after the experiment, what were their reactions like? There was a sign of relief. After the experiment, they showed sign of relief, wiped their faces, sighed. Oh, okay, some shook their head. Oh, we're done with this. All right, so calm minority, a small minority did not seem to be stressed. Okay, so which means majority of the people, despite the fact that they were still pressing the switch, they were stressed. So it's against them, there is a conflict in them, yet they kept obeying. Wow. All right, so debriefing, they were debriefed and interviewed and they met Dr. Wallace afterwards to ensure his well-being. So they were debriefed that, oh, we're sorry, everything was a deception. You actually never applied the real shock on Mr. Wallace. So the shock machine was fake. Okay. However, it was only the 45 volts we applied on you initially that was real. So, but then the shock generator itself was fake. All right. And you never knew. Did any participant suspect that? No. Okay, pain assessment. As part of the interview, before they debriefed them, they were asked to rate on a scale of 0 to 14 how painful they thought the 450 shock was. Okay, do they think it's very painful? And then a lot of them felt it was painful, which shows that, okay, yeah, they felt the procedure was real, like it was a real shock they were applying. Okay. Okay, so the results show that 65% of the participants were obedient. So out of 40 participants, right? Now, 26 participants went all the way through to the 450 volt. That is very, very serious. Okay. The student of Milgram and then his colleague already the predicted only 3% will be able to complete it. Now look at the results. People obeyed. Majority obeyed even to the end. That is serious. Now, defiant participant are the participant that stopped. Okay, at some point they felt, no, I can't do this anymore, and then they stopped. Even after using the prod, they stopped, right? So only 14 out of 40. All right. So 5 stopped after 300 volt. That was the time when the learner banged, right? So a lot of people stopped there that, oh, I can't do it anymore. 4 stopped after 315 volt. Okay, that was the time of the second banging. Okay, 2 after 330 volt, and 1 each after 345, 360, and then 375. But you can see that they almost got to the end, right? So if the least was 300 volts, so they moved all the way down, despite the fact that they knew that this thing was stressful. Now, when they rated using the self-report that we spoke about here, this interview, that how severe do they think the pain was for the learner? Okay, the teacher had to rate, they had to self-report how painful they thought it was on a scale of 0 to 14. Now look at the results here. The average rating was 13.42. So majority of them were in between 14, 13, 14, 15 like that, 13 like that. So majority believe that it was really, really painful for them. Okay. Now 368 volt mean voltage. All right. This was the mean voltage when you compare everything for the participant, all the participants. So conclusion and situational factor, legitimate. Okay, so moving to the conclusion, Milgram believed that there are some situational factors that could have caused the obedience, right? So the first one is the legitimacy of context. All right, so the environment they found themselves, all right, that could have necessitated that. You know, they used the Lindsay Chittenden Hall in Yale University. So it's a reputable organization. So if you're going to such an environment, that could have influenced your level of obedience because you believe that, okay, people in this environment know what they're doing, right? All right. So another one could have been the financial obligation. The thought that, okay, if I stop, maybe I might not receive the money, right? Okay, so this could also have been a social factor that could have enhanced obedience. Another one is proximity. Okay, do not forget that the participant and the experimenter, the biology teacher, 31 years old, they were seated together in the same room, right? Okay, so not even far from each other. All right, it's the learner on the other hand that was just behind the wall. Okay, so there was also personal responsibility. Okay, personal responsibility for completing the task and momentum of compliance. So these are also another factor. Some people would have felt that, okay, yeah, I need to finish what I've started, right? So that's another thought. Authority figure too. Authority figure, appearance and sternness. Okay, the biology teacher had a stern face. Okay, this like more or like of a serious kind of look. Okay, and also putting on the lab coat showing that he knows what he's doing, right? So that could have influenced people. You can also check some videos, or let me see my other video, yeah, on Bandura et al. I think I played a particular video showing how people obey those in authority without questioning authority. Okay, just because of their dressing and appearance, right? Now another one which is Okay, we have perceived lack of responsibility. Okay, they will not be held responsible anyway. We're invited, we're asked to do it, we were told to do it, we're only participating in this experiment. So it's the experimenter that is responsible, right? So that could also be a factor that encouraged obedience. So now, key findings: obedience to authority. Individuals are much more obedient to authority than expected, right? Stress responses: people find that carrying out destructive acts trigger feeling of stress. Okay, you can see some people sweating, some people are trembling, okay, numbness in the feet. Okay, there was another participant that smoked cigarettes just immediately after as a way to relieve himself of the stress. Okay, so there was social conflict as well. This is due to the conflict between two important social phenomenon. Number one, obeying authority, and then the obedience now is against um, people. You have to harm others. All right, so those are the two challenges you have to fight in your mind with that, so which led to stress, right? Okay, strength of the study. What is good about the study? Controlled environment, right? It makes it possible to control every other extraneous variables. However, there were social factors that could have influenced obedience, right? Which is not necessarily the let me say the authority now. Okay, but generally it's just the social factors that influence the obedience. Okay, um age was controlled. Okay, um okay yeah, you used a particular age. All right, you used the appearance was replicated for everyone. Okay, the shock level administered is actually the same. Okay, all right, so that is controlled. Standardization is another thing. Okay, the level of control and standardization, such as the same response, the same prods, the same shock generator and other things. So all the participants experience the same thing basically. Another one is realistic setup. All right, using the shock generator that looks real, such that nobody suspected that it was fake. Okay, that increases the validity. All right, so sample selection. Okay, the participants were carefully selected to ensure a range of ages, okay, a range of backgrounds, which allow it to have greater generalizability. So they selected people from different occupations and different age group. So, but then it falls between the 20 and 50 years. Now, quantitative data collected is another factor. Objective record of the voltage shock. Okay, how many voltage that was given is good. All right, so it is quantitative, it is objective, and it's also easy to compare between one participant and the other. All right, so qualitative data on the other one, where they have to the data record the data information such as the behavior and the comments that were made. That also shows in-depth analysis or information into what was going on in the mind of the participants. So that gives us a fuller understanding of their thought, right? What about the weakness, the sample limitation? They were all from New Haven, right? Do not forget. So, and they were all males, so which limited the generalizability. Ethical consent, they did not give informed consent because they deceived them. It was a false aim. Deception also is an issue. All right, okay. Also, they were deceived as regards the selection of the position, so it was rigged. Right now, right to withdraw, okay, was arguably denied because the prods the prods used, which are the four prods. Oh, please go on, the experiment require that you continue. Okay, it is important, it is essential that you continue. Okay, and then the last one being that you have no other option, you have to go on. All right, so that makes it look like you can't really withdraw. All right, so which is an issue, right? Now, and then we have the psychological harm that was done, which is the stress level that the participant had to go through. So that is also a weakness in the study. Okay, so how can we apply this to the real world? All right, administrative offices to stand up to unjust requests of bosses. Okay, so if you feel something is not right, okay, you can criticize, right? Okay, but then please be careful because you might lose your job, right? So be careful how you approach that. You approach that not with emotions but trying to be objective, right? Okay, so educational institute implementing ethical guideline and fostering critical thinking. So people should not just obey uh blindly, but they should be able to criticize if they feel what they're doing is actually against ethics. Okay, hospitals now have whistleblowing policies to encourage the reporting of mistakes made by doctor to protect patients. So these are ways to actually ensure that people do not just obey authority blindly. Okay. Oh, individual versus situational explanation, right? Situational factor. Excuse me, please. Okay, studies shows that the majority of the people will be destructively obedient if they felt that the authoritative figure is legitimate. All right. So majority of the people were obedient because of the authority figure, right? Yeah. What about individual differences? They were, despite the fact that they experienced the same environment, some individual stopped at some point. They pulled out, so they were regarded as defiant. Okay, and then some obeyed to the end, which were regarded as the obedient participant, right? Okay, so impact on psychology ethical guideline. All right, it led to stricter ethical guideline in psychological research. All right, understanding obedience. Okay, social psychology, we looked at this too. It influenced the few. All right, public awareness on the power of social influence. All right, so that can be very important. Social influence is very powerful. All right, so replication study. All right, you can look through all this. I don't necessarily have to discuss them. Okay, so conclusion. Understanding authority. Milgram study continues to be relevant in understanding how people respond to authority in various contexts. All right, ethical consideration. It reminds us of the importance of ethical consideration in research and real world situation. Okay, personality, responsibility. Okay, so individuals can begin to question the authority gradually. I mean, just critically and okay, I prefer to use the word humbly. Okay, yeah. All right, ongoing research. It continues to inspire new research into obedience, authority, and social influence. What I'm trying to say here is that, okay, humility is a good virtue too, so everyone should possess it. So we should not thrive on people's mistakes, right? So even if you notice that there's an issue, you don't have to obey blindly. So you can criticize, but do it in a responsible way, right? Okay, so that is it. Thank you very much. I believe you have learned one or two things about the Milgram study on obedience, right? So if this is helpful to you, please subscribe to my channel. All right. And also please like my videos. You can check my other videos. There's another video on Milgram, and then there are other videos too on all the studies under the AS level as well as the A level. All right. So thank you very much. I wish you all the best.